Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board for Licensing Contractors webinar. My name is Janine Miller. I am the Board Administrative Manager. I still see that there is a lot of people trying to get into the webinar right now, so we'll give them just a few more minutes before we get started to make sure everyone's able to get in. This webinar, it's scheduled to go we have 2 hours for this, so we can have an open Q&A after the webinar. We will not exceed past 12 noon if there's a lot of questions after the webinar, just to give you an idea. But if we don't get to every question today, we will provide an email address, or I personally or one of our agents will stay with you to help answer any late questions. But we will be getting started here in just a few moments. There's a lot of people still coming in. As people join us, just a couple of housekeeping rules for the webinar. We do ask kindly that you keep your microphones muted. Your cameras are optional. We do have the chat option available. So if you have questions during the webinar as we're covering certain license types and requirements, you may ask them in the chat. We'll also give an opportunity to raise your hand if you have questions to that specific license type when we are there. Also, this is going to be recorded. The recording of this webinar will be posted on our website after, for people that may have missed it, or if you would like to refer back to it for reference, if you are someone applying for a license and you would like to reference back to that section of the application for any clarity or answers, it will be available on our website. And that is, everything's free. This is our first time offering a public webinar, so we encourage and welcome any feedback after the presentation. If you felt this was beneficial to you as an applicant or someone interested in applying for a license, we would love to hear any feedback you may have. It looks like, let me see if I don't think there's anybody else waiting in the lobby, so we'll go ahead, we'll get started. Again, for those that just joined us, my name is Janine Miller. I'm the Administrative Manager for the Board for Licensing Contractors, and welcome to our first webinar. We'll try and make it as interesting as possible so you don't fall asleep. We know that webinars can be pretty boring, but we have a lot of helpful material, and we're going to try and cover every aspect of how to achieve a contractor's license, how to apply for one successfully, all the requirements, and be available to answer any questions that you may or may not have. We're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to introduce our Board Executive Director, Christopher Burkhart, who's going to lead us off starting in the webinar. So Chris.
All right. Good morning. Again, hi, my name is Chris Burkhart. I go by Chris. Unless you're my parents or close relatives, then I'm Christopher. But welcome, and thankful that everyone is on today. I'll go over our presentation that I give out to lots of organizations and associations. Hopefully, this will help spawn some questions that you have as we go along. Hopefully didn't get muted there. Attempt to answer everything that you have and help you get on your way, or answer any questions you may have to adjust your license going in the future. Just want to say that, again, that what I present here is, look at the disclaimer. They're not necessarily speaking directly for the board, but or any legal advice. And so just want to put that out front. But these are the things that some things that for as we go through and process and administer the licensing program for contractors. So go to the next slide, please. Can we go to full screen? All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so the Board of Licensing Contractors is sits inside the Division of Regulatory Boards, which is in the Department of Commerce and Insurance. And here you see a Hollywood Squares depiction of a lot of different programs that are licensed or by the state. And so you see not only is it contractors and electricians and plumbers, you see accountancy, you see architects, engineers, you'll have real estate, the athletic commission, all different types of boards or professions that are regulated within the state of Tennessee. And so we are just one of those boards. I believe there are 16, if I remember right. And I think we're adding. Also adding this year due to legislation, bail bondsmen are also going to be becoming a part of the regulatory boards. So we'll move on to the next slide. Here you can see the mission of the Contractors Board. Here is basically to ensure fair standards across the board in the industry of construction to really protect the public for public safety and welfare. Now you can see there, this board has been around for a little while. We've been around since 1931. And so coming up nearly on 100 years here in a few years. So we've been around for a while and don't think we'll be going anywhere anytime soon. The state is continuing to grow and doing a lot, and we need to have lots of construction to keep up with people that want to move here and conduct business here. And so just with that, again, 1931 was the first, it was opened, and then currently license number 2 is still active in this with the state. And so we're in the 5 digits of license numbers. I think we're in 83,000 license numbers, but license number 2 is still active. And so so they were licensed in 1934. And so we got a large span of different license numbers we still maintain across the industry. And so just briefly, if you look down the second point there, we're going to talk about what constitutes a contractor, but just keep in mind the threshold of $25,000 or more, and then $25,000 or less. We will also talk about those different types of licenses as well. But we go to the next slide. Just to tell about who we are as a board. We're made up of 9 board members that are appointed by the governor, and they operate on 7-year terms, and they can be do multiple 7-year terms. And so of those 9 board members, 3 of them are appointed from East Tennessee, 3 of them from Middle Tennessee, and 3 from West Tennessee. And they all have different disciplines that they come from: electrical, plumbing, residential, commercial, roadways, all different kinds. So they make up the entire gambit of the industry. What's something that is unique with Tennessee, as I've learned, I've only been on with this board just over a year, and I've met with other states that have similar boards. The state of Tennessee, all construction is housed up underneath this one board. Other states, if you're licensed in other states, you may have noticed that they may have different boards for different disciplines. For example, I know Alabama has different boards for certain disciplines. It's a completely separate board for HVAC, a completely separate board for residential construction, and for commercial. But all of this for Tennessee is housed up under this one board. So we got a large mission for us. Our staff here that works with me, including me, is of 11. And so you've now met me, and you've met Janine that came on earlier. But we have 9 other folks that also do the day-to-day operations of going through the licenses, the applications, and ensuring that everything is there before the applications get approved. And so we also have other support offices that help us. We have our legal office, our legal team that helps us on a daily basis. We also have a complaints office that is a consolidated complaints office So if we go back to the other first slide with the Hollywood squares of all those uh, different boards, all the complaints come into, you don't have to go back there, but I'm sorry. Um, they all go into that centralized complaints office, and then from there, those complaints get parsed out to the investigators that go out and do the investigations on those complaints. With a consolidated complaints office, we also have a consolidated call center. So if you call in and need some assistance, it first goes to a consolidated center, and they have a lot of information. But if they can't get to the answer that you need, that call or your information and your question gets passed up to us here with my staff of 11 that will reach back out to you and assist you as we can. So that's kind of the makeup of who we are with the board. But then we're going to talk about, and these are the different flavors of licenses that do programs that we administer. So contractors with $25,000 and up. We also will talk about home improvement licenses where that applies in certain parts of the state. And you see that the range there of $3,000 just below $25,000. And we also have limited licensed electricians and plumbers as well that operate under that $25,000 threshold. All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, who is required to be licensed? All right, so we get that question a lot, and so this basically we're talking about general contracting here, and so I just want to kind of set some terms out there about what we call general contractors. Commonly, general contractors are known as your residential or your commercial builders. But a general contractor in the state of Tennessee is anybody that operates with a contractor's license over $25,000. So you can be a general contractor with an electrical classification on your license, and so or a plumbing license. And so I just want to make sure that term is out there. And if we kind of slip up on those terminologies, please ask the questions and we'll make sure we get it right. But I just want to kind of read off a definition that we have in statute just to kind of set things off, and we can talk about the different subcategories there in just a moment. But I'm looking at everything that we operate. Our authorities are in Tennessee Code 62-6 100 in that paragraph following 100. And so I just want to read paragraph 102, section 4A. This is what is defined as what a contractor is. And so a contractor means any person or entity that undertakes to or attempts to submit a price or bid or offers to construct, supervise, superintend, oversee, schedule, or direct in any manner, assume charge of the construction and alteration, repair, improvement, movement, demolition, putting up, tearing down, or furnishing labor to install material or equipment for any building, highway, road, railway, sewer, grading, excavation, pipeline, public utility structure, project development, housing development, improvement, or any other construction for which the total cost is $25,000 or more. And I'll stop there. So that covers a large range of activities. And so if you get questions, hey, do we need to be contracted, be a licensed contractor for X, Y, and Z? Most of the time, we're going to say yes, because that's a very broad definition. And so that's the general term for contractor. You can see our sub-bullets under there when we talk about prime contractors, subcontractors, and I also want to talk about construction management and consulting as well. But as you can see, based off that definition, all of this here requires you to be licensed with the consideration of a few things that I want to point out under the subcontractor bullet. A prime contractor means that you're the one directly dealing with the owner, and so as a prime contractor, you pretty much accept the responsibility and the risk of all construction activities if you have subcontractors. Now, subcontractors may or may not be need to be licensed based on the amount of work that's being performed in that subcontractor category, with the exception there if any of the work as a subcontractor under that prime contractor in electrical, mechanical, plumbing, HVAC, and roofing needs to be $25,000 or more. If that part of that subcontractor work on that prime under that prime is $25,000 or more, those categories must be also licensed. All right, and then masonry is up a little bit there to only $100,000 and up. And so those are the caveats for a subcontractor. So make sure you keep that in mind if you're doing work as a subcontractor under a prime. And so those you just got to be mindful of that. So what I want to define what we talk about, what goes into that $25,000 is materials, equipment, and labor. And so that's what we factor in into that. So sometimes we get the question about does profit get it included, and technically it does not. And so we got to make sure that when you itemize your bills and your costs and things like that, we are only looking at materials, equipment, and labor is part of that $25,000 or more for your monetary limit. And just want to highlight again, based off that definition, construction management or consulting on a project, you also have to be licensed when the total project is $25,000 or more. All right, we'll go into the next slide here. As a general contractor, these are the major contractor categories that you will see on your license, and we'll get into these codes a little bit more later. We also have documents on our website. You see and again, you'll have access to this presentation, and you'll have access to this document to understand what all these codes are. But the most prominent one is our BC code. It's building construction. So a BC, is broken down into three subcategories, which is BCA, which means residential, a BCB meaning commercial, and a BCC meaning industrial. And so in order to be a contractor in one of those categories, there's also a trade exam that's required. So I won't get into all the different things that needs to be exam required or not. We could talk about those if questions arise. But you can be a general contractor with any of these categories on your license, and some require exams and some do not. And so, but generally, when you talk about being a subcontractor and not being licensed, that's where those 34 subcategories kind of fall into place there. But if there's questions on those, we can get to those later. All right, we'll go into the next slide. All right, I know this is an eye chart here, but we also we have statutes and rules for bids. And so primarily this is doing government construction, bidding on construction work for government, but this really applies to anything. If there's if a project is out for bid, there are guidelines to follow when you are bidding. The biggest thing is you got to be licensed in the first place to do any bidding. You can't say, I've applied for anything and I haven't got it yet. You've physically got to have your license in hand and have the ability to bid. And so if you are going out there to bid on any project, you got to have your information, and then based off whatever the work is for subcontractors. Again, if they're electrical, if they're plumbers, if they're roofers, if they're HVAC, if any of that work in those categories, your subcontractors also need to be licensed. So you got to make sure you have all your ducks in a row when you're doing your bidding. And so the procurement specialists across the state, they're aware of all this, and they can either accept or reject your bids as well. And sometimes they will let us know if there's violations going on. And so we do have, the board does have ability to set some civil penalties against bidding. And so just wanted to highlight that. All right. Any questions so far, or anything in the chat that we need to address?
Yes, please raise your hand if you have a question over what the content that we just covered, please.
Okay. Not seeing any questions just yet. We'll keep rolling along. The next slide. We do have reciprocity agreements with some of our neighboring and near neighboring states. What this really covers or waives is a trade exam waiver. And so it's not like you can still carry a permit from one state. If you got it in one state, you can get it in the next state. No, pretty much no questions asked. You still got to go through the entire licensing process. If you are licensed in Alabama, for example, and you want to get licensed in Tennessee, and you took the trade exam in Alabama, for any one of those, there you see general, electrical, residential, or HVAC, we have agreements in place for those specific disciplines. You would provide a license verification form from them, and we would accept their exams that you took in their state, and not have to take the Tennessee version of the exam. You would still have to go through the entire licensing process, that we'll go over in just a few moments. But all reciprocity does is have the potential to waive a trade exam that we require in the state. And so there's a link there at the bottom. You can see what we have, but we're always looking to expand this network, and we're actively trying to do that now with some other states. But this is what we have at the moment. Any questions on reciprocity? Okay. Keep on going. Okay. Oh no, we got a question. Can a trade exam be waived for a non-reciprocity state?
No. Yeah.
The short answer is no. However, there's always an opportunity to come interview with the board at our board meetings. But generally, no. The board, unless they're listed on here, the board will make you take the exam. I will say that we are in discussion with Virginia to get them added. It's not something that happens overnight, but we are in discussion with Virginia to add them to our list. So, and I don't have a timeline to get that to say, hey, when this will happen. And I believe the question here in the chat, I'll just read it. Will they still need to take the business and law exam in Tennessee? Yes. So good question there. I forgot to mention that. This is trade exam only. No matter what, you would still need to take the Tennessee business and law exam, even if you have a trade exam waiver from one of these states for one of these disciplines.
We have some hands raised. JK, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, got 50 years experience in Virginia and is licensed for over 30 years, Class A contractors and HVAC and plumbing and everything. And, if they could potentially make an exception, how would you go about doing an interview with them to get that exception made?
Well, we have interviews at our board meetings. We have our board meetings on a bi-monthly basis. So January, March, May, July, September, November. We used to need to have those exclusively. I won't say exclusively, but mostly in person. However, there's a new bill that was signed into law from the governor that basically gives us more authorities to go back to having board meetings like we are right now over Teams. And so we can set up, and we will start to set up more and more interviews via Teams if you're not can't make it to Nashville on on the board meeting day. Um, we just have to have a conversation with us with your application, and more or less submit your justification in writing of what you why you wanted to meet with the board, and have potentially have your basically grandfathered in, lack of a better term.
Right. When is the next meeting, out of curiosity?
Yeah, the next board meeting is the last Tuesday in July. I believe it's July 29th is the next board meeting.
And that's in Nashville, right?
It is in Nashville, yes. And going forward, all board meetings will be in Nashville. Again, the governor's new law removed the requirement to have board meetings, in other parts of the state, east and west as well. So, and our board members all agreed just to meet in Nashville or meet virtually for every board meeting going forward.
And I would need to bring then like the proof of licensing for all those different things from Virginia, correct? Like with me to the meeting.
Yes, that would work. Again, if you have a list of experience, all that out laid out. We'd like to review and see what you have first and everything in writing. That way, and present it to the board members before the meeting and say, hey, they're looking to want to interview with have an interview. Would you accept this? And so that I think that would be the kind of the way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions on this topic before we move forward?
Okay. We're going to get into the next slide now, kind of some nuts and bolts of actually applying. But this is kind of the landing page for doing all of our all your applications online. And so we strongly encourage everything to be done through this portal that can be done. We do acknowledge that there are some applications that we have not brought completely online yet, but for the initial licensing, for renewal, for monetary increases, to add classifications, all your basic ones are there to do online. And so you can go in here, set up an account, and go through this, and Janine will walk you through this here in a little bit. But this is just want to show that. But this is also where the public can come to this landing page as well and look up licenses. And so again, so we want to make sure all information is out there for the public to make an informed decision to hire somebody as a contractor. And this is a resource that they have to ensure that somebody is licensed before they enter into an agreement. All right, next slide. All right, so there's 8 basic steps to become licensed, and each one of these are hyperlinked, and we'll go through these in a second here. I want to give it to Janine to go through, but I want to foot stomp or highlight the first 2 steps. Is to make sure that you have all your trade exams, your business and law, all done before you actually apply, because those sometimes take time to get scheduled. Sometimes you may have to retake a test and things like that. So we will make sure that those are all in hand before you start the application process. And again, a financial statement is also a long pole in the tent as well. In order to get initially licensed, you got to have a reviewed or audited financial statement from a proper licensed CPA that's also peer reviewed. And so those can take time to get done. And so we'll make sure that those 2 things I want to highlight those 2 things, but I'm going to pass it now over to Janine.
Hey y'all, for those of you that came in late, my name is Janine Miller. I'm the administrative manager for the board for licensing contractors. And I'm going to cover the application portion of these licenses. It can be a complex process if you don't know what you need to do. So we're hoping that this webinar will bring some insight on how to apply for this license, what forms are needed, which ones would apply to you or not, and also kind of how to interpret them and what they mean and why we need them. We're hoping that if you have a better understanding of these forms and what is asked or what is required to obtain these licenses, it'll make it an easier process for you. So we're going to get started with the licensing steps. I'll probably have to move some of the presentation stuff around because I'm also going to share the forms that are required. I'm going to share the common errors that people make when applying for a license and how to properly fill out the required information that we need in order to get you licensed quickly without any delay. So there are many requirements, as Chris said, to obtaining a contractor's license. And just to be clear, these are your big boy contractor licenses. This is for anything contracting projects $25,000 and above. And then Chris will go over the individual licensing and the home improvement licensing after this. So just want to be clear, this is specifically only for the big boy contractor licenses that are gives you the license to build a skyscraper or hospitals, homes, freeways. So the first thing is the testing. If you are an organization or just starting as a sole proprietor, and depending on what type of trade you specialize in, there are exams required. No matter what the trade you want to specialize in, you have to take the Tennessee State Business and Law exam. There are no exceptions to that. And this is a state-specific exam. It is open book, and we use an outside resource for the testing, which is PSI Exams. They're a national testing vendor, and that you can go online at any time to psiexams.com to register for the trade exam that you're going to need. Or if you only need the state business and law, you can sign up for that there. We do have some resources available online for that, also in our packet. And it is open book. So anyone can take the exam. A lot of people ask, who can take the exam? It can be an owner, it can be an officer, it could be your office manager, or your project manager, just as long as they are a full-time employee or owner of the license. The trade exams, we're going to go into the trade exams. Further into this, I will share my screen and I'll go over some of those forms. I'll cover the classification outline briefly, because there's a lot of stuff there, and how to interpret, reading the classification outline. And we'll go into that, and that will tell you specifically what the abbreviation means for the exams. You probably saw on the previous slide where it said BC, CE, CMC. People are like, what does that mean? So it will explain to you what trade is covered under those abbreviations in the classification outline, which I will provide for you. Also, the financial statements, I will go into detail about the financial statements, most common mistakes, and kind of help interpret a lot of the supplemental forms. That is very common for initial licenses. And we'll cover that in depth because that seems to be the most complex part of obtaining a contractor's license. The reference letter, also insurance requirements. We're going to go over that and what type of insurance may fall for the workman's comp coverage. We have different questionnaires that determine what kind of and what type of coverage you're going to have to provide proof of. We're also going to go over registrations, who needs to be registered with the Secretary of State, who does not. And then, of course, if The application signatures and notarizations, there are some forms that do need to be signed and notarized and submitted with your application. It is a requirement. And if you apply online, you attest online. If you apply by paper, you have to have the actual PDF paper application notarized. And then the application fee. Okay, the application fee for this license is $250. It is non-refundable. So if you apply for a contractor's license and you decide if you don't meet the financial requirement or you can't pass the trade exam or your application is incomplete and your application expires out, then the application fee is absolutely non-refundable. We can transfer the credit to a new application, but we cannot, it is a non-refundable fee. And then, how long does it take to actually get licensed for the license to be issued in that process? Okay. Let's see, let me, what do we have here? So I'm going to go ahead and go over this, the types of license, the classification outline, and the application resource. These are the really, really big ones. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this presentation real quick, and I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go over some of the forms in order of what we're going to need to obtain this license. Please make note of any of the forms or the requirements that I'm going to go over. If you have questions on any of those after we cover this, I will be happy to answer any of those questions. And again, this is a recorded webinar, so if you are filling out your application and you can't remember what I said, what did you say about that workman's comp? You can always refer back to this recording and get those answers. And of course, you can always contact us if your questions are answered and a new one arises. Okay, so let's see. Let me go ahead and let me see if I can figure this out here. We're going to share screen. All right, let's see if this works. So it might look funny for a second. Sorry about that. All right, can you see my application online for contractor's license? All right, we're good. All right. So this is this is a resource that is available on our website. When you go online to register to apply for a license, it'll ask, do you have these forms available to submit with your application? You want to make sure, and I'm going to stress this, be sure that you have everything that is required and it is done accurately and completely when you submit your applications. Due to our high volume and the amount of applications we get, if we ask for something that is deficient, if your affidavit page wasn't notarized or you didn't get the proper financial statement that we need, we do allow 30 days to get that additional information to us, or at least communicate with us what's going on with it, so we're aware. And if we don't hear back, we're going to close your application. We will reopen the application if it's within a year from the initial date that you applied. Okay, so just as long as it's within the initial date or within the year from the date you applied, if we end up closing it because you didn't get a review or an audit, we will be happy to reopen it. We can reapply the fees, but we will not reopen it and finish your application process until we have every single document that is needed. So it is very important that you have all these things ready when submitting your application. That is why we're hoping that these webinars will be very beneficial, because I'm going to go over how to do that. So we're going to get started. This reference is available on our website. You can email in and request it. We'll be happy to email it to you. I will provide it as well in the attachments of this webinar after. So you can download it, you can save it, you can review it after. And I'm just going to scroll down, and this has all the information that you need. So the first thing, and one of the most important things is your experience. This is a common mistake that people will make when applying for a license, is they're not providing accurate experience of what they're applying for. So list of experience there, you can either submit this online through the online application, or you could submit this page as an additional document and upload it with your application. But this experience is very crucial to your application. So if you're applying for a residential contractor's license, but your QA or the owner or the person with the eligible experience to oversee these projects only has experience in doing mechanical plumbing for residential houses and not ground up experience of residential properties, they are not going to issue you that classification and license. They will request a different trade exam and say he only shows experience for this. So it is very important that you list at least minimum 4 projects of the trade that you're applying in, and also the monetary limits. They want to know what size projects were these. Were you a subcontractor for a prime contractor working on initial or ground up residential properties? What was the average, contract amount for each of those projects? Who was the contractor that you worked under for each of those projects, if you are a subcontractor? If you are a contractor and you've had contractors licenses in other states and you obtained this experience in other states, that is acceptable. You just need to write Georgia, Florida projects, subdivisions, or you build every Buc-ee's. We get that. Specific types of commercial properties, or highway, railroad, or storm damage. Whichever your trade is, you want to put that down the state. If you are the licensed contractor for that in other states, you can write those numbers down. Also, in
We got
detail,
a question here.
Okay, one moment. With the types of projects, the scope of work, I would, if you're applying for multiple different classifications, say you're applying for residential and commercial, you want to, you build houses and you build McDonald's, you need to submit 2 experience sheets, one for each trade, one for the commercial experience that you have and one for residential, or if you have electrical, mechanical, etc. So I do see some hands raised. We can go ahead and unmute. Kathy, can you go ahead and unmute the individual with the question? Or James, let's see.
Hello?
You can
you hear me?
Hello? Hi.
Hi. So my question is, I'm wanting to submit for the home improvement license, and in the experience there, I see one of the things particularly it said, and this is for painting specifically. I want to do residential painting, and one of the lists inside of the requirements it says or resume of management. I've been executive level management at places outside of the industry. So, managing teams and different things like that. And I'll be using subcontractors for the paint. Would that experience in a different industry be listed for the resume of management?
They would take that because that's considered, project management.
Yes.
Which is required to be licensed. So that would qualify as experience. You will have to list that though. So if you were like a project manager overseeing that for, a company, or any experience you have with that, you will have to list that. It's the same with home improvement. Home improvement licenses, you will have to list that experience. Or if you have any hands-on experience yourself in it, you can list that as well, or any project management experience that is acceptable.
Okay. Many years ago, I had a PMP, project management professional certification. I managed big electrical projects. Has nothing to do with painting. Would I go back and list that as well? Or...
That's up to you. Yeah, you can. For home improvement, it is not classification specific. However, they do have a list of questions of what type of trade that you are going to specialize in with home improvement. If it is just interior paint or exterior paint for properties or commercial, they will note that. So that is something that you won't necessarily be assigned a classification for that. But you will have to list any and all experience that you have. And home improvement licenses do not cover, and we'll get to that later in the presentation, but it does not cover electrical or plumbing.
Oh yeah, totally agreed. All I want to do is painting, but I don't have personal experience in painting, but I do have management experience. So my question was, will my management experience outside of the industry satisfy the experience requirements for the home improvement painter?
Just as long as your management experience is within the industry.
Within what?
If it's in the industry.
It's not.
Okay. If you want, I think it would be best if you email in your list of current experience if you want us to review it. And then we can guide you from there of what you have, because the board is, they want to see experience in the trade. So if it is project management, they're going to want to see that you worked with, painting or a painting company or hands-on experience, and you're going into management is okay as well. So they want to see relevant experience in the trade, either as project management or hands-on building. So if they don't have that, or if you are an employee of a company and you're obtaining, that experience being an employee under another organization, they will take that. So if it's not in the trade, there might be some problems. They may ask you to come in for an interview. But if you don't have the experience, I would advise maybe going and trying to obtain some.
Yeah, that's the problem with opening a new business, because the county that I'm in requires it. So how can I do the work to get the experience if I can't do the work to get the experience? Really, so it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah, I would go and do that.
And the thing is, I'm not going to be...
Now, there's also some trade schools available as well. Maybe one loop around that. If you don't have the experience, there is a class which we'll go over. It's called it's a residential restricted license, and it teaches you the trade that covers painting. So like you could take that trade course, get the certificate, submit your application with your management, and write a letter explaining that you took this course and you're wanting to do project management for painting, and that would probably satisfy the board requirement, probably. And I'm just making an educated guess based on my experience with the board. So, and what the things that they look for. But if you don't have the experience, I would recommend maybe taking that trade class, and you would probably quickly obtain some, and they would be happy to see that you went ahead and got some education on it first, and that would probably satisfy that. And I'm going to cover some of that.
Okay, yeah, just makes it a little. The probablys are difficult when you're starting a business because you've already invested so much in it. So you hear all these probablys, and it's very difficult to say, "Oh man, this is going to work." I mean, you need some definites, and that's what I haven't been able to find. And
yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm not going to pick up a paintbrush. I'll never paint a wall. I mean, if I do, there's something really wrong.
Yeah, it's hard work. I've done it myself. So, but yeah, but yeah. So if you want, after the webinar, you can hang tight, and I'll give you some guidance on what options you have to get around that. But I would suggest maybe taking the trade course and starting from there, and then at least you have the knowledge base to be able to do that.
Okay, so I'll have to drop early, but I'll get back on, or if you send me your email address, I'll contact you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. The experience sheet. This is a common thing that holds up applications, is not
You lost.
having.
You're not. You're not sharing your screen again.
I'm not?
No.
Okay, I'll reshare. Let's see. Stop sharing. Doo-doo-doo. Okay, is it sharing now? Nope, I'm sharing the wrong one. Hang on, I'm sharing the wrong form. All right, let's see. Share this one. Okay, there we go. You should see the experience sheet. Yeah, all right, we're good. Okay, so back to the experience sheet. This is one of the most common holdups of your license. So just to clarify that again one more time, make sure you submit experience for each trade, each classification you are applying in. We need at least 4 projects in that trade. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. The contractor's affidavit page. This is an absolute requirement for all applications. The affidavit page, you have to mention your mode of operation. We verify this information. So are you a sole proprietor? Are you registered with the Secretary of State as a corporation, partnership, LLC? We do verify your business registrations with the Secretary of State and also the name of the business entity, okay? This is a common thing here that we send back. If the names do not match, we'll send it back. So everything on your application has to match. The name has to match with how it's registered on the Secretary of State. Your financials have to match with what's registered on the Secretary of State. Your insurance and how you put your name on the application has to match. All the documents have to match legally with how you're going to be operating. That is very important. If you have someone else filling out this application for you, like an office manager or a secretary, make sure that they are aware that everything has to match. That is very important. We see this mistake a lot, okay? If you are a DBA and anytime while holding the license, you change your name, you have to report it to the board. And again, everything has to match, okay? And it is very important that everyone understands that just from the start. So make sure that however you register your business, everything matches in that name. You do have to answer these questions. They want to know if you have or have not had a bankruptcy. The board does not discriminate on that. They will not deny you a license if you had a bankruptcy, but you do need to answer the question honestly. And they also want to know if you have any felonies, etc. They would ask you this online, but they ask you to do this on the affidavit page. And that includes the felony, that includes anyone as a full-time officer listed, an owner, a QA, or anyone directly involved with the responsibility of this license. You have got to answer that question honestly, okay? Or have you not bid without a license? You don't want to lie on this because as Chris said earlier, they do tattletale to the board. So make sure that you answer that honestly. And then everyone that is going to be listed that has part ownership, qualifying agents on this license, everyone needs to sign it, okay? If you have, I have had questions that there's owners in another country or owners somewhere else. Do they have to sign it as well? Yes, they do. But you can send in 1 or 2 of these individually if they can't sign the same page. That is acceptable just as long as we have it. And this has to be notarized. Absolutely has to be notarized. This cannot be filled out online. We need this form notarized with all the signatures. Do we have any questions on this form? I don't see any. Okay. I'm going to move on. We do need a letter of reference. This letter of reference, this can be from any past clients, employers, code officials commenting on experience, anyone that you've worked with in the industry that can attest to your quality of Workmanship, this is something that we need. We need at least one letter of reference. So this will be required. You can send in multiple if you'd like. Yes, I see a question. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm seeking a license in the BCB and the BCC category. Do I need a letter of reference for each of those categories?
I mean, it's suggested, but we only require one.
Okay.
So if you have a letter of reference, like someone that you've worked with a lot in both of those classifications, you can have them fill out one in both. If you would like to submit one in both, that is recommended. The board does like to see that. The more information you provide is welcomed. It's better to have more information than less, if that makes any sense. So, but we only require one in order to consider your application complete. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Any other questions on this? Nope. Okay. I'm going to go on. This does not need to be notarized, by the way. So, and you can submit this with the application. We do know that some regulatory boards require them to send it directly. We don't. However, if it looks forged, we'll know. So I'm just joking. But we've seen a couple of them. So just make sure that you submit this with your application at the time. Power of attorney. Okay. So what this is for your qualifying agents. So if you own the license and you're the owner of the organization, you don't necessarily have the hands-on experience. You have a qualifying agent that you hired that has the experience, took the trade exam. They're the ones that have, done project management for industrial construction for the 10 years, and they're joining your company and you're starting a business in Tennessee, and that individual has no ownership or less than 30% ownership of the license, they have to fill out this form. Okay, so what this does is this gives the person who is your qualifying agent that does not have ownership of the license or less than 30% ownership of the license needs to fill out this form in order for them to be your qualifying agent. Okay. So that is very important that you have this if they don't have ownership in the license. This does need to be notarized. Okay. So if you have a qualifier that is not ownership, that has no ownership in the organization, we need this form. Now, we do get questions, can you have more than one QA? Can the owner and somebody else be the QA, a full-time employee? The answer is yes, you can have more than one QA, but you cannot have more than 2 QAs per classification, okay? So if you have a BCA and a CE and a BCB, and you have 2 qualifiers for the BCB, but only 1 qualifier for the CE, like you could do that. Just be aware that anyone that does not have ownership as a QA in a certain classification will need this form filled out, okay? Any questions on the power of attorney? It's pretty straightforward. No? Okay. This is the request for license verification. This is the trade exam waiver agreement that Chris went over. If you did take a trade exam in one of the reciprocal states, we need this filled out. We see a lot of people submit this form and they just fill it out randomly and submit it, even though they don't need to do that. We do not need this form unless you are trying to reciprocate your trade exam, okay? So only for those that are applying from, say you're an electrician in Ohio, you took the trade exam in Ohio, or if you took the commercial exam in NASCLA, we do take NASCLA. We only take NASCLA electrical and commercial, just so you're aware. So if you did take those, that does waive the trade exam for you. We just need your NASCLA scores. But any other state will have to fill this out. Okay, we need to see the state seal, and your license also needs to be active. If your license is not active in one of those states, we cannot accept this. So if you are an electrical contractor in the state of Ohio trying to get your CE electrical license in Tennessee, but your license is expired, we cannot take it. You will have to take the trade exam. So just if you are reciprocating, make sure that your license is active. We do not reciprocate the journeyman licenses or the limited licenses in the other states right now. We currently don't have that. Just so that you're aware, it's strictly just the full trades. Okay. And then we're going to go into insurance coverage. Okay. So for insurance, you have to have a minimum of $500,000 general liability, and it changes based on your monetary limit. There is a page in this packet that will show you the threshold, of how much general liability insurance that you're going to need. The absolute minimum is 500,000 coverage, and I believe that's for much smaller licenses. And then it goes up to 1 million, 2 million. Sometimes we see people with 4 million. So it depends on your monetary limit, which I'll cover the monetary limit here shortly, and your insurance threshold that you need to meet. Okay. You have to show 5 policies on your certificate of insurance. You have to discuss that with your insurance agents. General liability is an absolute requirement. Okay. So keep that in mind. Minimum 5 policies of general liability insurance. And when you get that insurance coverage, the board has to be listed as the certificate holder. And we just need that 1-page certificate of insurance. And that has to be submitted with your application. And again, I cannot stress enough that the name has got to match. So you as the insured, that name has to match with how you're applying for your license. Okay. Certificates of insurance is one of the biggest things that we request corrections on, either because we don't have, the name doesn't match. So say your license name is going to be Miller Brothers and Sons, right? Your insurance is going to have to say Miller Brothers and Sons as the insured. Okay. It can't say Miller Brothers and Sons doing business as Bucky's. We won't accept it. We'll ask questions. Why is there a DBA? The DBA is not registered on the Secretary of State. So we'll start, kicking it back for those reasons. So just be mindful that we have to have, everything has to match on that as well. And same with the certificate holder. There's a little box on the bottom left-hand side of the certificate of insurance where it says certificate holder. It does need to say Board for Licensing Contractors with our address, the 500 James Robertson Parkway. That information is everywhere on all those forms. You'll be able to get that, type that in, and then submit that. Now, when it comes to the workman's comp coverage, this one's tricky. A lot of people want to know, what type of workman's comp insurance do I need? Am I exempt? There's a lot of confusion with workman's comp. And this form is great because if you answer the questions, it tells you what you need. So we don't necessarily, we will need this form if you're applying by paper. If you're applying online, it will ask you these questions. We do not need this form. Okay. But workman's comp. So first question, if you want to know if you're exempt altogether, the only way that you are exempt altogether is if you are a sole proprietor as one owner, one person, and you contract directly with the owner, and you do not hire any subcontractors at all, and you have 0 employees or 0 other owners. So that is one-man show. It is just you, no employees, you do not hire subcontractors, then you are absolutely exempt from workman's comp only. Okay. That's very rare. We don't see that a lot with contractor licenses. It's common in some home improvement licenses, very common in home improvement, but it's not common with contractors. So we will, if you are putting down, oh, I build, $3 million homes and it's just me and I have no employees and I have no other owners and I don't hire subcontractors, the board might say, okay, well, come in for an interview. I want to know how you're building this house all by yourself. Right? So just make sure that you're answering those questions honestly, or make sure that you're providing the proper insurance for that. The other option is if it's you and a business partner and a qualifying agent, there's 3 people total, and you do not hire any subcontractors, but there's 3 officers, which would be called like less than the 5 employees. Each of those individuals will have to either register for the workman's comp exemption registration with the Department of Labor, or you have to provide proof of workman's comp insurance. It's one or the other. So if you don't want to get workman's comp coverage for a couple people, and you do not hire subcontractors, or if you hire subcontractors, you can do this too. If you hire subcontractors, all 3 of those individuals will need to register for workman's comp exemption. We will need it from all 3 people listed, or proof of workman's comp insurance. And then if you have 5 or more employees, you have to have proof regardless. It doesn't matter. You just have to have it. And those are the 3 categories. So it's either the exemption registration if you have 5 or less employees, or if you're one person, one owner that hires subcontractors, or if you're a project manager with this license and everything is subcontracted out, you can have the exemption you have to have the exemption registration or proof of insurance. So I didn't touch on that, but if it's just one person, project manager, you hire subcontractors, you have to have the exemption registration or proof of insurance. Okay. I'm sorry if I confused you on that one. This is the tricky one. Does anybody have questions on the insurance, on the requirements?
There was a question about what do you mean by the 5 policies? And I know Kathy tried to put it in the chat, but they said some people can't see the picture that she posted.
Oh, okay. So on this handout, it will go over that. It kind of depends on, let me see. There's a lot of information, by the way, on this resource. A lot of people will see this. It's very intimidating. Please don't be intimidated by it. Just find the section that you need answers on, and it'll help you. So here, even spots here, there's a checklist. You have it. It has some of the information here, and there's some links. Hopefully these are correct links. We'll make sure we get you the right ones. If it's not, it should take you to those forms, but it is down here. I just got to find it here. Insurance. And it's usually, Kathy tried to show it, your insurance agent will tell you what 5 policies are available. It's usually like general liability, accidental, property. I would have to pull up a certificate of insurance to show you, and a credit. Here we are. No, this is financials. Okay, here we are, general liability. I have a feeling that this just takes you to, yeah. What I'll do is I'm going to give you the insurance packet, and it covers that in detail for the insurance. We have a whole separate PDF for that, for the general liabilities that you can review. You can take it to your insurance agents and talk to them about it, okay? After the webinar, hang tight and I'll send you that PDF packet. It is also available on our website. Any other questions on the insurance? Any questions on the workman's comp? No? Okay. Now, we're going to go into, I want to share this real quick. This is a hardship request. We see a lot of people make this mistake of what a hardship request is. If you need an emergency license for a client of yours, say you're licensed in another state and you build all of the St. Thomas hospitals in the country, and they want you to build a new location, but you're not licensed in Tennessee yet. This is considered, that would be a hardship license, a request for early review. And what this does is it just kind of puts you ahead of the line. And we have to have this hardship license request filled out by your customer that needs you to do this project. So a lot of people misinterpret that what the hardship request is, and they'll submit it and say, I need to make a bid. We do not consider someone trying to make a bid or trying to meet, they really want to do this project. We don't consider that a hardship. A hardship is considered something from the customer requesting you specifically to do the project. And they would have to fill this out, and this would have to be submitted with your application. And I would highly suggest that you call in or email in saying, I submitted a hardship request with a copy of this and your file and application number, so we can get to it as soon as possible for you. I would submit it online and also email in just the hardship license request as well, but make sure it's actually a hardship request. If it is a hardship request to make a bid or something else that is not requested from the customer, we will not treat it as a hardship. Okay, I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. Sometimes wrong information is told out there through the trade, and that is not how it works. I just want to be sure. So now we're going to go into the financial statement requirement of this license. Financial statements are very difficult to understand or to obtain. I am going to go over the financial requirements for the license, what the monetary limit is, okay? The monetary limit, it will ask you on the application portion, what monetary limit are you requesting? The monetary limit is how much money you're allowed to do in that trade. Okay, so say you want to be able to build residential at 1.5 million, that is per project. So that will grant you the ability to contract residential properties at 1.5 million in that trade per project. And in order to obtain that 1.5 million in residential contracting, you have to show proof that you have the financial stability in your organization to support those projects, okay? I want to make sure that that is very clear. And the board requests that you provide proof that you have 10% minimum in your net worth and your working capital in your organization to support those projects. And that is what needs to show on your reviewed or audited financial statement. If you want anything over a 3 million monetary limit for your initial license, which is called unlimited, you have to have an audit. It is an absolute requirement. You have to have an audit. And the financial statement cannot be older than a year. It has to be a current financial statement. So you cannot submit an audit or a review that was done multiple years ago. It has to be current, or else we won't take it. Sometimes if there's an explanation, if it's within 14 months, which is common that we see at year end, if we know that, it's 14 months because of tax season or whatever the situation, if you give us a reasonable explanation, we can possibly still take that within a 14-month period, but it has to be current. That is number one mistake. not current financials. Second mistake is the CPA that prepares your financials has to be peer reviewed. Our auditors, we do check to make sure that your CPA has the proper requirements, that they are peer reviewed, they are licensed. It is very, very important that you hire a CPA that has these credentials. We do have links available where you can search online, or you can verify someone that you're maybe wanting to hire, or maybe you're a CPA here trying to get answers for yourself. Just make sure that it is you are with a peer reviewed program. Okay, otherwise we will not take it. And just to be clear, this is for initial licensing. Okay. That is another common mistake, is we have to reject it because it's not done by a properly licensed CPA. We need the full financial statement. We need the letter. We need the footnotes. We need the balance sheet and any supplemental financial information that may be required. So going to that, when I say you have to show 10% in your net worth and your working capital, the other most common mistake that we see in your financials is people do cash only. You're quickly trying to start your business. You're putting $1 million in the bank under your business name. You go hire a CPA and you have no assets. If you don't have any hard assets in your new business name, you don't have trucks, you didn't disclose any tools, you don't have any equipment, you don't have a brick and mortar building. If you don't have any hard assets and you just do strictly cash, we're going to ask for supplemental financials to support it. The board recognizes as cash is there one day and gone the next. This is one of the biggest things that hold up your financials in your application process. So if you're just starting an organization and you have a cash only financial statement, I would strongly advise before you get it done to transfer either work trucks, those titles, your tools, a workshop, disclose those hard assets in your reviewed or audited financial statement. Ask your CPA how to do that, because that will give you the hard assets. It won't be cash only. And then you don't have to put your personal property on the line. Okay. So that is something that I want to make very clear. We see that a lot, and people don't like to do that, because what will happen is if you do a cash only, this is when you're going to have to submit a personal financial statement. Some people are okay with this, but it's not recommended, because if anything were to happen to your license, and you don't have that cash, it was in the bank one day, gone the next, it puts your personal property on the line. Okay. So you do not want to do this if you have to start your business. It's very common. And if you eventually get updated financials in the future, you don't have to do this anymore. But to get started, if you do cash only, you will have to submit a personal financial statement, which is a balance sheet. It looks just like this. And this tells you what is considered a current asset, what the board recognizes as non-current assets, and current liabilities. I can see if I can make this page bigger here. So it will tell you on these balance sheets what's what. It'll help you realize, okay, so this is what's not a current asset, yada, yada, or current liabilities, long-term liabilities, rents, mortgages, bills, credit card debt. You're going to have to disclose all of this stuff. Okay. And you'll have to have it notarized. The owners of the license, if it's a 50-50 ownership, it can be done by one owner. It can be done by both separately. That'll be up to you and your business organization who wants to put their personal finances on the line to support the license. That's up to y'all. But again, to avoid this, I highly suggest not doing cash only and getting hard assets transferred into your organization prior to getting your financials done. Okay. And then if you do the personal financial statement, you'll have to submit a personal guarantee agreement. Okay, that has to go with it. It has to accompany your personal financial statement. The guarantee agreement is going to have to be in the minimum of the amount, the 10% of the amount that you're requesting. So if you're requesting a $3 million monetary limit, your guarantee agreement is going to have to be $300,000. Again, it has to be the name on the license, not your personal name, how you're going to be licensed. And it says here, name as on license. So however you're applying has to be written here. And then you want to check the personal guarantee. You want to fill this out, notarize, and sign. I'm stressing this because this is the most common mistake with licenses and applications. Okay. Corporate guarantees. If you have a parent company, a holding company, you want to use their financial audits, their reviews, you can absolutely submit that. Okay. You can submit their review, their audit. You'll have to submit an in-house balance sheet for the organization that you're applying for. And then we'll need the corporate guarantee agreement from your holding company. Okay. And then that will have to be also notarized and submitted with your application. So that is an option. We also have, and we'll need the notice of liability guarantee agreement as well. It's a page that's accompanied with it. Again, has to be notarized, signed. Other options that we will accept is a bond in lieu of a corporate guarantee agreement. We have bond in increments of $1 million or $500,000, but that can be very pricey. No one wants to pay $20,000 a month for $1 million bond. So just make sure that if you do want to go the bond route, we see that a lot with holding companies. That is an option instead of the guarantee. And also a line of credit. A line of credit only supplements your working capital, your current working capital. So if you're deficient in your working capital, you can get a line of credit. I'm going to kind of speed up because I'm looking at the time going, we got a lot more to cover. But I really wanted to stress this information because these are the most common questions. And I think it's really beneficial for you to hear it straight from source. So I'll go ahead and stop with this here, pass it back to Chris. And then if there are any questions regarding the financials, because we kind of need to speed up a little bit, please hold those for after the presentation, and I'll be happy to stay after and answer any financial questions that you may have for the application process. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Janine. That's a lot of information, but it's very,
it is
good,
a lot of
important.
It is a lot of information. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was very thorough on that. Let me go back to the PowerPoint here.
Go PowerPoint, and we'll move on to the slide with projects less than 25,000. I think it's slide number 13.
All right, here we are.
Okay. All right. So what we've talked about so far is projects over $25,000. And so here's a list of programs or licenses that we administer under $25,000. And so we have home improvement, we have electrician, we have plumber, and we're also going to talk a little bit about HVAC. And so we'll go through these. So again, less than $25,000. So we'll go to the next slide with home improvement. And it is very similar to the general contractor license. However, it doesn't carry that monetary limit. It's a up for 3,020 up to 24,999 basically. The licensing process is somewhat similar with minus minus the trade exam and the audited or reviewed financial statements that are needed. You do need to provide a surety bond for home improvement licensing, but it is more or less a scaled down version of the general contractor's license. So the other key part of this is the home improvement license is not statewide. If you see here in the second bullet or the third bullet down at the bottom, those counties highlighted in red are the only counties that had opted in and participating in the home improvement license program. So basically, it's your bigger metropolitan areas. You've got Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga and Knoxville areas, those in those surrounding counties, that are primarily the ones that have subscribed to this home improvement license. So what this means is if you do work in any of these counties and it's in between 3,000 and 24,999, you at minimum need to have a home improvement license for construction work. If you do have a general contractor's license over $25,000, you do not need to have a home improvement license. So that would, if you have the larger license, you're exempt from having a separate home improvement license in those counties. So just we'll make sure that that's clear. And so, so again, those are for Bradley, Davidson, Haywood, Hamilton, Knox, Marion, Robertson, Rutherford, and Shelby counties. And so, do we have any questions about home improvement license? Again, there's no classifications breakdown for home improvement. It's you have it or you don't. And so it covers all disciplines except for plumbing and electrical, for improvement work, home improvement work, in those counties. Okay, again, go to the next slide here. Application, again, is very similar. It's a $250 application fee. And here's a breakdown. Again, you still have to provide, instead of a financial statement and bonding proof, you need a $10,000 surety bond. You need proof of insurance. You still got to do your general liability. You also got to do your workers' compensation. And again, also be registered with the Secretary of State for your business. And so, again, it's very similar, but not quite as intensive as a general contractor's license. Any questions over home improvements? All right, we'll move on to limited license electricians. The state, again, this is below $25,000. So again, the state doesn't go generally by the apprenticeship program, apprentice, journeyman, and master programs for these trades. But we do kind of break it off. Under $25,000 is more of your journeyman, type of work. So we do offer this to individuals. This is an individual license. The processing of it is very simple. However, before you apply for an LLE, you want to make sure that you understand the local jurisdiction and local codes and local permits in your local jurisdiction that you're going to be doing work. Not all places recognize the LLE. And we'll say that. So you want to make sure that, if you're working in Nashville or wherever, you want to make sure that they accept the LLE before you go through the process, because they may have their own internal process or internal licensing process in some of these larger metropolitan areas. I do know that the Knoxville area is getting rid of their LLE and LLP programs and their local programs and relying on the state licensing process. And so, so be aware of that. There is an exam involved as well for the limited license electrician. So we'll go to the next slide here. Is this is a very simple process to do. It's a $50 application fee. You pass the LLE exam. Provide, fill out the application, provide, proof, and it gets turned around. I would say, here 2 weeks, but it gets turned around really quick for this license. Any questions about LLE? All right, we'll move on to LLP. It's very similar to LLE. All the things I said about LLE, about checking with your local jurisdiction first, applies here as well. But one thing that's additional for plumbers over what for license is you have to have a year's worth of experience that has to be listed for plumbers in order to take the exam and get everything and get the exam taken and passed. I hope I'm saying that right, Jenny and Kathy.
Yeah, that's correct. You definitely have to pass the exam. One common mistake, to add to what Chris is saying, for these licenses is for the plumbers, you do have to show experience. There is an experience sheet and also a letter of reference to verify your experience. So a lot of people don't submit that. Also, we need a copy of your photo ID. These are individual licenses, not organizational. And since it's individual, we do need to have your photo ID, and that is the common holdup for these. So that's the only thing I have to add for these.
All right. Yes, thank you. All right. And I think the next slide it kind of talks about the process. Again, it's a little bit more expensive, $75 versus $50 for this one. But again, please check with your local jurisdictions first before you go into this one. And then I think we have next slide is renewals. Okay, we'll get to renewals. But I want to talk about HVAC. I listed HVAC. We get a lot of questions about HVAC. And so a lot of it, we just, it's a million degrees outside and people are calling to get, HVAC worked on with their houses. You will need, it depends on what type of, HVAC system you're working on, but you'll need an LLE or an LLP to pull permits to do the electrical work or the mechanical work based on the type of system that you're working for. So we get a lot of questions of, hey, do I need an HVAC license? It's technically not an HVAC license, but you'll need an LLE or an LLP to pull the proper permits for the local local permit office. And so anything else on HVAC, Janine?
Check with your local jurisdictions. Some counties won't take an LLE for smaller HVAC maintenance and repair work. They will only require a CMC HVAC classification. So, or some counties, if you're if you had an LLE and you apply for a CE license, which is an electrician license, some of the counties may not take it because the HVAC classification is under something different with the general contractor's license. You'll need the CMC classification, which I know we were kind of running out of time, but I can go over the classifications if anyone has questions on that after this presentation to clarify some of that for you. So just make sure that you're always checking with your counties first on what the requirements are for HVAC maintenance. If you're going to have a contractor's license versus an LLE. That's the only additional information I have on that.
All right, thank you. All right, real quick, I want to touch on renewals. You get past your initial licensure. That license is only good for 2 years, and then you'll have to come up for renewal. So whatever month you get your initial license in, it will be the month 2 years later that it'll expire. So if you were to get licensed this month with your initial license, so June 30th, 2027 would be when your license expired. We send out renewal notifications 90 days prior to that expiration date, and you can apply within that 90-day window anytime to get renewed. We always ask you to send it sooner than later because there's a lot of renewals to process. Once you hit that expiration date of the end of the month, say for example, if you expire at the end of this month, June 30th, 2025, and you haven't sent in your renewal yet, or you send in your renewal July 1st, your license goes into what we call expired grace period, which means that you have the ability to renew 1 year up to 1 year later without having to go through the entire reinstatement process. What expired grace means is basically that, but it does not mean that you can go out and bid on and take on new work while your license is in that expired grace period. So keep that in mind. Please get your renewal in plenty ahead of time. I would say at least 30 days before the expiration date. That way we can ensure that the renewal process will go through smoothly. And the renewal process is a lot easier when you go through for renewal. You'll have to make sure that you have up-to-date insurance. You have to provide an up-to-date financial statement. But the financial statements requirements are different for renewals than they are with your initial license. The breakdown for your financial statement for a renewal license, if your monetary limit is 1.5 million or below, you can provide a handwritten balance sheet that's notarized and send that in. So it does not have to be compiled by a CPA. You can do it through QuickBooks. You can do it, however you want. But as long as that's, again, to continually demonstrate that you have the financial backing for your current monetary limit. If it's anything over 1.5 million up through and including unlimited, all of that is needed at a minimum requirement is a compilation report from a CPA. You don't have to provide a reviewed or audited financial statement anymore, but we will accept those. So, and so that's a little bit difference between the financial statements going forward after you get your initial license. If you had a monetary limit of 1.5 million and you want to increase your monetary limit at some point in the future, you'd have to go back and provide the reviewed or audited financial statement to attain a higher monetary limit. But just for renewals, you wouldn't need that. One thing additionally is there's going to be continuing education requirements. If you have a residential classification on your license, that means you have a BCA or a BCA restricted. And so that means this was something that was put in place. If your initial license after January 1st, 2009, and you have one of those licenses or classifications on your license, that means that you will have to provide some continuing education credit hour, 8 hours of that. And we have links on our website of who the approved providers of those continuing education requirements. And so those will have to be added to your renewal application. But I also want to highlight that as you get into your renewal process going forward. So I think this is our last slide of material. So if there's any questions on anything that we've said, anything that Janine went over, if you want to look at questions about classifications or financial statements, we are here and available for the next 30 minutes or so. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, please raise your hands if you have questions, or you can ask them in the chat, and we'll be happy to address that. Amanda?
So on the business and law exam, I thought you said that anyone can take the exam. They can be an owner, an officer, office manager, or project manager. And I thought it was said that a full-time employee or owner of a license. What does that mean?
Full-time employee. It has to be someone that is with the license that's listed. So it's not uncommon for a full-time employee that is going to be a qualifying agent. They will be considered a qualifier if they take the business and law exam. So if it's someone that is, that's not going to be leaving for a long time, they can take the business and law exam. And the business and law exam also stays with the license. That never goes away. So if say, for example, their office manager, who's a full-time employee, takes the business and law to be the qualifier for that portion, and she gets replaced in the future, that business and law qualification will stay with that license. That test will not have to be retaken. So it's just a one-time test for that. Does that make sense?
I think so. It's recorded, so I'll listen to it later. Make sure that I can make sure.
Did you have someone in mind that was going that you want to take that exam, or?
Well, I know that we have some reciprocal licenses that we're trying to do.
Mhm.
And I know that we have a general contractor with Tennessee. So I was kind of just thinking, like, does it have to be the person that took the Tennessee general contractor license, or could it be, somebody else? I guess was my thought process for that question.
Yeah, they would be considered a qualifier. So whoever takes the trade exam would be considered a qualifier, as well as the business and law. If the only trade exam or the only exam that we need is the business and law, they would still be considered a qualifier for the license.
Okay.
Because going into the classification outline, whether it's reciprocated or if they take the trade exam, let me make this bigger here. So it will tell you next to the classification if a trade exam is required on all of these. So depending on what it is that you're applying for, we might be able to help you with that, or you can always call and ask, and we should be able to help you with that. But all this information is also on the classification outline as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Hey, Joey.
Yes, the question I have is I passed the BCA/small B for commercial small residential.
Okay.
And on my experience letter, a lot of what I've been doing is subbing, building my own personal properties and building for myself. Do you count that as experience, or would I need, I guess?
The board does not recognize self home projects, your own property, as experience.
Okay.
So they will not accept that. You will have to get outside experience. So if you don't have hands-on experience working with a contractor company,
no, I do. I mean, I just was asking, could I include that for experience as well?
Unfortunately, no, they will not accept that.
All right.
Good question.
One other question I have is so if in my church, we built a family life center, since that was small commercial, I didn't have a contract on that, but I was the deacon and trustee at the church. So I was the project manager, so to say. Would you count that as experience?
Absolutely.
All right. And so could I put all those on one sheet, or they need to be on two separate sheets, one for commercial, one for residential?
You could combine it. I mean, if it depends on how much experience you have. If it would all fit on one sheet, you could do that. So if you don't have 4 commercial projects, but I would suggest I personally, and I know the board appreciates it, if you list them separately, if you're doing paper.
Okay.
If you're doing it
I'm
online,
gonna do it online.
Yeah, if you do it online, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're listing minimum. If you have multiple classifications, I would say minimum at least 3 in each of those minimum. They'll take that, but we like to see 4 if it's just one classification. And just make sure that if you want the full qualification for it, you have to show ground up experience. So if you only have, say, hands-on experience in doing the carpentry and roofing and
no, we did ground up.
Yeah. So if they only see certain amounts of experience, they may change your classification. they might approve your license based on certain classifications of the experience that you're providing. So just be aware of that.
Okay.
Right.
I just want to kind of highlight is what I think what Janine is talking about. If you take the full BC exam, which includes residential, commercial, industrial, but your experience only shows that you've done residential, the board will only approve the BCA, the residential part of that, even though you took the exam and passed the exam for the full BC. What that means is you get some experience in the other parts of that BC exam. Then you can come back and get that full BC added at a later point once you have the experience.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You can modify those licenses at any time. Once you have the license, maintain it. You know, it's hard license to get, and you can modify it as many times as you need to. You can change your qualifying agents. Those change a lot. You can upgrade your monetary limit as you gain more experience and as your business grows. You can add additional classifications. You can do a lot of things with the license. So once you get this license, make sure you maintain them for sure.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay, good. That was a good question. Any other questions, Joey, before we move on?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. All right. Vance.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm also going to bounce off of job experience. I've basically been working as a project manager / supervisor for another company. And so under the experience portion of my application, I was just wondering about specifics. So would I put contract numbers, dates, and prices of contract, or what as far as my execution of those contracts working for somebody else?
Yes. So if that's a good question. A lot of times, let me pull up my experience sheet again here. Wait, no. Which one's this? I got a lot of open windows. Give me 1 second. Let me find it. This one. Okay, let me go back up here. So they want to know, now if you're just an employee, hopefully you can see this okay. I'm making it bigger. It says here performed as contractor, subcontractor, employee of contractor. So if you're just an employee of a contractor, you can check that box. The board will still want to know who the contractor was, like what's their license number. If you don't know what their license number is, you can check on our Verify website. We have a website called verify.tn.gov where you can verify contractor licenses, or you can just ask them. They should know it. Or if they're licensed in another state, you can note that, you know, did this project in Georgia and they're licensed in Georgia.
Would sorry to interrupt. Would you want the contractor's license of my employer and the GC that I was employed by under that contract?
No, just the prime contractor. So if you were an employee of a subcontractor, I would still just put employee of contractor.
Okay, so the prime or principal. Okay.
Yes, yeah, we want to know the prime. Yeah. So because if the prime is subcontracting you, but if it could be a tricky question. If you're still an employee of a subcontractor, I would mark employee. Okay. And then you with the contract amount, even if you know you don't deal with the finances, if you're not sure what the contract amount was, give us an educated guess. Average.
I'm actually the opposite. I'm kind of more or less an employee that's been dealing with huge contracts for years, and multi-millions of dollars. I've been project management. I've done every aspect of it, metro contracts, whatever. And so all I wanted to do is show that, obviously I am an employee, but that my experience shows me in all those bounds of contracting, basically to you guys, to the board. So when I just wanted to know my best way of showing that. I can get all that information. What's my best way of showing it?
Another thing you can do, which is not uncommon, if you have a lot of experience, you can write a resume.
Okay.
It is not uncommon for organizations or applicants to submit, a full resume of projects, of what they've done. We've seen it in all different forms. So you could put together a full experience resume, like a technical resume, and submit that with your application. You can definitely do that.
Okay. Thank you. It was just one of those things that, you don't look like a huge company, like you said, unless you transfer a bunch of money or something like that, but that you have been in the industry for a very long time working for other bigger companies, in your position or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So just also to be clear on that, if you don't have the financials and a monetary, but you have the experience in a higher limit, okay, so like say you have the hands-on experience in really large projects, but your financials only support $1 million monetary limit, the board is not going to give you something higher than what your financials will support, even if you have the experience. So just know that, okay?
Yeah.
So they'll only grant you a monetary limit of what you can financially support.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I best showed my experience. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
And just to jump in, conversely, you may have all the financial backing in the world, but you may have only done, $20,000 projects. They're not going to give you an unlimited license unless, so there's a balancing act that between your financials and your experience of what the board will approve.
Okay. I was more or less on the other end. I'm highly experienced, looking like the very small end of financial. So that's where I wanted to know, my best way of proving that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I see Kathy's been answering some questions in chat here. You're looking, okay, so Kathy, are there any questions in chat that you haven't answered? Let's see, I'm scrolling up here. There's a lot.
Yeah, I think I've got most of them except for the last one.
You're
classifications.
Okay, so Rodolfo, you're looking to get a license for fiber and conduit. Do I look? Yeah, so yes. So if you go back to the classification outline, pull that back up here. So the classification outline, Rodolfo, you will find that information here. It goes over a lot of the different building categories. And if you specialize, in one thing that is not under any of these categories, we do have specialty classifications. And I do believe one of them is that, right? Let's see, communication, cell towers. We have, the boring directional tunneling, fiber. We do have low voltage classifications as well. So certain industrial equipment installation. We have specialties for just about everything. If there's telecommunications, I would apply for what you think best suits the trade that you specialize in with your application. And as we process your application, when we review your experience, if we'd be like, oh, okay, this actually, he's applying for telecommunications, but it actually would fall under what the board would see as low voltage cabling, right? This is just an example. We will go ahead and we'll fix it for you. We'll fix that classification that you should be covered under for what you specialize in, and we'll also communicate that to you as well. So when you're submitting your application, just make sure that you review the classification outline, select the trade or the specialty or the classification that best fits what you think you're applying for. And when on the review side, when one of our agents reviews it, they will be like, oh, they meant this classification. We'll fix it for you. And when we send it to the board, the board member may review it and be like, actually, they should have this classification, and the board may reclassify you best to what's suited for your professional trade. So I wouldn't stress too much if you put the wrong classification down. We will fix it for you on the processing side of things, if that makes sense. Okay, does that helpful? Any other questions of anything that we've covered? Any licensing questions? Okay, if there's no further, oh, okay, Amanda?
Where will this recorded session be held at again?
It will be posted on our website. So under the public meetings, there, like our board meetings, you can go back and watch previous board meetings. There will be a link there. Our technical team will edit probably the first hour of recorded video, and it will be posted on our website. So that'll be there. And also I will add the PDFs, or actually it looks like Kathy, can you link the I'll try and link the PDFs here in the chat as soon as we're done here. You can download, but everything that I've shared is also available on our website. So
I'm sharing my screen right now. This is our main website, first page, and then you'll see public meeting information here on the left. Highlight here and just click it. It'll be under public meeting videos.
Yeah.
And so it'll be posted here within a day or so.
Okay, when you said you'd audit the first hour, does that mean that this last hour of questions that we may have not got all the details written down will be missed?
Be there. Yeah,
Okay.
no, it'll be there. The whole webinar will be up. The webinar somehow accidentally started recording like an hour and a half before it started.
Okay.
So it's just, there's a lot of nothing.
Thank you.
That will be edited out.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Hopefully we get some good feedback from everybody. We really do appreciate everybody being on. Again, if there's questions, I think Kathy had put up our email address. But Kathy, can you do that again there at the end for any specific questions you may have, you may think about after we depart from here? We'd be happy to get back with you.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think we're going to close it out, and we appreciate you being on today.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay cool in this horrible heat.